It's week 17 of the NFL. We give you our best three bets for this Sunday, and it all starts right now. Hey, it's Matt from GrandstandBettors.com, and Happy New Year. 2023 is here, and so is week 17 of the NFL season. We'll get to our best bets in just a moment, but first, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button for all of our NFL picks, predictions, and contests here in 2023. And while you're at it, smash that like button if you are ready for some NFL on this Sunday. I know I am. It's a great way to start the year. So without further ado, let's dive into week 17 and start with the New Orleans Saints and the Philadelphia Eagles in the 1 p.m. Eastern time slot. Eagles are favored at 6.5 points at the moment. The over-under is at 42. Now, the New Orleans Saints kept their season alive last week as they did beat my Cleveland Browns 17-10, even only after putting up 244 total yards. We won't get into the Browns and how awful they are because that would take too much time, but the Saints are now still alive for the NFC South Division title. All that needs to happen is they win this week against the Eagles and Panthers beat the Bucs this week. And then next week, if the Saints can beat the Panthers and the Bucs lose to the Falcons, they are into the playoffs. It's honestly crazy, but still, in our opinion, that even though it's possible, it's very far-fetched. Especially since the Saints are in the bottom half of the league in total offense, scoring offense, and surprisingly rushing offense. As we mentioned last week, Andy Dalton has been a game manager, and they actually have been much improved in the passing game this season. Last year, they were dead last in the NFL in passing, and they are now ranked 15th in yards per game. And also, there have been a lot of injuries on this team, especially at the wide receiver position, as both Landry and Olave were out last week and have missed weeks throughout the year. That has hindered this team, but it does look like Chris Olave has a chance to return this week. However, will he be enough help for the Saints to get a win against the best secondary in the NFL? Philadelphia, despite giving up 304 passing yards last week to the Cowboys, they are number one in the NFL in allowing just less than 185 yards per game through the air. And their defense is averaging nearly 2 takeaways per game and has the best pass rush in the NFL, averaging 4 sacks per game. So, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, who can clinch home field advantage throughout the playoffs with a win this week. It does appear that Jalen Hurts will sit out one more week, and we will see Gardner Minshew at quarterback, who threw for 355 and 2 touchdowns, but also had 2 interceptions last week as well. People forget that Gardner Minshew is actually a seasoned quarterback. The guy started 23 times in the NFL, most with Jacksonville in 2019. He does have a 7-13 record in the NFL, but to be honest, it's not a true evaluation of who he is as a quarterback. He did have a lot of that time in Jacksonville. If it's a better coach, better team, hey, who knows? Maybe it's a different career path for him. On his career, though, he does have 43 touchdowns to 14 interceptions with a 63% completion rate, and he did just put up 355 yards against a top 10 secondary last week. It was a little surprising that they threw so much against the Cowboys, but really, because Jalen Hurts was out and he does account for a third of their rushing attack, I can see why they decided to go through the air. The Saints, they do have a bottom third rushing defense in the league, so if Miles Sanders is good to go this week, and it is still up in the air, they might look back to go with their rushing this week against the Saints, because the Saints have the second best secondary in the NFL right behind Philadelphia. So what is our best bet in the Eagles versus Saints in week 17? Well, this one really had us going back and forth here, especially with Olave, Kamara, Sanders, all really questionable to play on this Sunday afternoon. We do think that this game comes down to defense, which one can play better, because both offenses might be a little less than you would think this week. Both teams will probably look to run the football against each other, as that is the weaker spots of the defense, but we think the difference here and the maker of this game is the Eagles' rush attack, the ability to get to the quarterback. As we mentioned, they are number one in pass rush in the NFL, and we think that's just going to be too much for the Saints and Andy Dalton to handle on the road in this one. So, with our first best bet of Week 17 in the Gardner Minshew we trust, we are going to take the Philadelphia Eagles minus 6.5 over the New Orleans Saints. Now, with our second matchup of Week 17, we're going to take a look at the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders in the 4 p.m. Eastern time slot. 49ers 9-point favorites at the moment, over-under set at 42.5. Now, since the moment Jimmy G went down against the Dolphins, Purdy has thrown for 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions, and has not lost a game in the NFL. So much for Mr. Irrelevant, right? I mean, the 49ers come into this week with a chance to actually get the number 2 seed in the NFC, but they would need some help from the Vikings. There is no signs of this team slowing down. They're top 10 in scoring offense, total offense, and rushing offense. Christian McCaffrey is leading the rushing on this team, and he didn't even get there until almost halfway through the season. The great thing about this team's rushing attack is that they will use literally everyone in their schemes. Just last week, McLeod had 1 carry for 71 yards and a touchdown. It really just shows you that anybody can be a part of this rushing attack. Now this week, the Raiders, who have a mediocre rush defense, might be able to slow down the 49ers rush attack just a little bit, especially since there's been a drop-off in that rushing attack since Deebo Samuel did go out a few weeks ago. But really, the 49ers might just throw the football this week, not because of how decent the Raiders' rush defense is, but mainly because how bad their secondary is. They are 6th worst in the NFL, and even Kenny Pickett looked decent against them last week. So let's talk about the Raiders for a second, or what the Raiders fans right now are referring to as the Las Vegas dumpster fire. News broke early in this week that Derek Carr was going to be benched in place of Jarrett Stidham, who was going to get his first ever career start. Well, that did not sit well with Derek Carr, and supposedly he has left the team. Real quick on that subject, I'm honestly not quite sure the benching of Carr was warranted. Yes, Carr has thrown a league high, I think 14 interceptions, but honestly, it's not like their defense has helped their offense out this season at all, and he had won 4 of the last 6 games for the Raiders. Either way, though, you have to be a man. You have to take what happens to you with class, and him leaving the team because of somebody else starting in his place just tells us all we need to know about Derek Carr and his personality. I mean, come on. Matt Ryan sat down without saying a word when he was benched earlier this season. Anyways, the team probably is in disarray coming into this week, and who knows what you're really going to get out of Stidham. In his career, he has appeared in 11 games and has a 52.5 completion percentage. Now, with only 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in his career, he's going to have to do a lot to show us that he should be in the league after this game. The one person they still have on the team, the Raiders, to give them any type of hope is Josh Jacobs in the backfield, who has over 1,500 yards rushing and 11 touchdowns. Although as a team, the Raiders are just averaging over 120 yards per game themselves, Jacobs, he is actually averaging over 5 yards per carry. But why would they rush or be able to rush in this game? They are facing the number 1 rushing defense in the league this week. So the game plan, who knows what it's going to be for this dumpster fire in Las Vegas. So that begs the question, what is our best bet of these two teams that are going in opposite directions? Well, this line started at 5.5 while Carr was still the quarterback, but then shot up to 10 after he got benched. It has settled in at 9. The only reason, honestly, that this one isn't higher is probably because Purdy is at QB for the Niners. Now, once Stidham throws an interception in this game, and he will, I think we're going to quickly see the Raiders and their defense essentially give up and pack it in on the season officially. The 49ers in this team, they're going to put up a massive amount of numbers and points in this week. And with Stidham trying out possibly for his career, or maybe a starting QB with the likelihood of Carr probably not coming back to the Raiders next year, I think the Raiders are going to find themselves some offense and score some points this week. So, with our second best bet of Week 17 in the NFL, we're going to take the 49ers and the Raiders over 42.5 points. Now, before we get to our final pick of Week 17 in the NFL, just a reminder, if you want all of our plays, head on over to grandstandbettors.com, join our family, and start living that grandstand life. But, as we mentioned, we do have one more best bet for Week 17, and it is in the LA Rams versus LA Chargers, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time slot, and the Chargers 6.5 point favorites with the over-under set at 42.5. Baker Mayfield is now 2-1 in his 3 weeks now with the Rams after that beatdown against the Broncos last week. Mayfield went 24 for 28 with 230 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And honestly, Cleveland Browns fans are asking, where the hell was that efficiency in Cleveland? Mayfield's throwing at a 69% completion rate, a 4-to-1 TD to INT ratio, and since going to the Rams has done a great job even without the biggest offensive weapon the Rams have on their roster, Cooper Kupp. But let's not overreact to Baker and the Rams' 2-1 record in the last 3 weeks. The offense, despite looking to the trained eye like they've been phenomenal, actually ranked 3rd worst in yards, 7th worst in passing, and bottom 10 in rushing during that 3-week span. So you have to ask yourselves, how have the Rams gone 2-1 in those 3 weeks? Well, 4 words: Derek Carr, Russell Wilson. Those 2 QBs they faced in their 2 wins, between the two, threw 5 interceptions in total, and the Raiders and Broncos turned the ball over 6 total times combined in those 2 wins. Baker and this offense, especially last week, played with a very short field on offense, and the 1 week that they played a decent secondary, Mayfield only threw 50% completion rate for 111 yards with a 1 touchdown to 1 interception ratio against the Packers in that loss. So, this week, when Baker goes up against a top 10 secondary, things should be a little different than what you saw last week against the Denver Broncos. Now, speaking of the Chargers and their secondary, they've won 3 in a row after handling the Colts there easily on Monday night. Justin Herbert, still in my opinion, is not as elite of a quarterback as you think. I see a lot of these media guys out there telling me that Justin Herbert is a top 5 quarterback in the league, and honestly, I disagree. Come at me in the comments. I don't care. I know I'm going to get heat for it, but I know that Herbert has top 5 in passing yards, completion rate, and yards per pass, but in my opinion, being one of the best quarterbacks in the league, you have to be able to come through in the clutch, and honestly, I've not seen that yet from Justin Herbert. Now, we won't see anything this week to change my mind, as the Chargers have already clinched a playoff spot, but Mr. Herbert, if you do want to start changing my opinion, then win one of your 2 remaining games and try to get that 5 seed so you can play the Titans or Jags rather than the Bengals, Chiefs, or Bills. So, what can or will they do to get a win this week against the Rams? Well, hopefully pass the football, as the Rams have the 22nd best secondary in the league, and despite Russell Wilson throwing 3 interceptions last week, he still had over 220 yards before he even got pulled. Austin Eckler has been great for this team, putting up 759 yards on the ground and 11 touchdowns, but the Rams do have a top 5 rush defense, so it might be harder for Eckler this week to get some yardage. So what is our best bet in this Battle of LA on Sunday afternoon? Well, like we said, the Chargers should be passing the ball, and we would really be surprised if they didn't. They throw the ball 2nd most in the NFL, right behind Brady and the Bucs at 42 pass attempts per game. Even though the Chargers have a suspect rushing defense, the Rams' rushing offense, honestly, with Akers and company, has not been impressive. In fact, they're 4th worst in the league with less than 90 yards on the ground per game. So look for Baker and this offense to have to air it out a bit more this week. I know they don't want to. And really, against a better secondary, look for Baker to make some mistakes. Some of those mistakes that we're also used to in Cleveland. The hype comes back down to earth this week with Baker Mayfield. And with our best bet of Week 17, we're going to take the Chargers -6 over the LA Rams. Well, that does it for us here at Grandstand Bettors. As always, sit back, relax, have a great New Year's, and we will see you live in 2023 for Browns Commanders right here on YouTube.